It's War season. We're here with Scoop, and there are a couple of pretty decent options to be fair from New Zealand this year. And yeah, with the going into the season without SJ is pretty sad, and without Tohu Harris, how are these Wars going to go, Scoop?
I really hope they go well. There's going to be a lot of disruption. I don't currently have them super high on my ladder, but if they end up clicking with some of these new signings relatively early, and Fisher Harris can lead them around in the park with some very, very good experience coming from a winning mentality on a four-peat from the Panthers, that will be very, very good. So if that was the case and their attack started to flow, you could probably add 2 or 3 points to a lot of these yellows and pretty much turn them into greens. So they could be a team that you have maybe one or two from to start the year. But if they start going on a run, you might be buying a fair few after their round five bye.
Yeah, definitely. They're in a pretty similar mold by wise with the Knights. Knights are in round four, Wise are in round five, and then you get them all the way through to round 15. So a pretty interesting team on that front. If they're a non-Origin guy, which obviously a lot of the Wise players are, Fisher Harris and Luke Metcalf, who you've got in yellow there, spring to mind as two guys that if you were to start with them and for them to go really well, then it could set you could set yourself up really nicely heading into all the way into that mid part of the season, which would be fun. But mate, looking at the back five, is it a bit light on for options, mate?
Yeah, the one you probably would have looked at is Lea Tua, but he played enough games that he didn't get a discount. So
Hmm.
most of them are probably going to sit similar to where they are. Gallon, after a down year, might get a couple more tries, but like the year he averaged 45 was the year he scored like 1.2 or 1.3 tries a game. And you can't just expect that to happen all the time.
Yep. And a team that isn't expected to get better as well. That's for sure. But guys, for those who are asking, when does the game open? We don't know exactly as well. So we're in the same boat as you. When we find out, we'll tell you. Most likely, we're getting closer. Every day we're getting closer, somewhere around Australia Day. It sounds like for maybe both browser and app. We usually get the browser first, but yeah, thanks for asking and being interested and wanting to play. Thanks for that. But yeah, we don't know as well. And for those interested in the private group, all the information is in the description, guys. We have all of the best coaches in the game in there offering advice. You've got Mitch in there, for example, who's gone top 100 the last 3 years, 21st last year. Yeah, and all of us in there as well. Plenty of prizes and everything up for grabs as well. So jump in there and get better and be around people that love talking fantasy all day, every day. It's the best place to be. But Luke Metcalf, mate, in that six role, coming off another injury, sadly, with him, and that spells a little bit of his downfall. But a 33 average last year for someone that is very likely to get the goal kicking this year is a terrific boot on him. If he's to be partnered with Tamari Martin, definitely that would be the play. But what would be the pros and cons for Luke, mate?
So there's a couple of pros to Luke Metcalf, actually. So first of all, goal kicking should add sort of 5, 6 points a game to him with the boot. He basically didn't kick at all last year. And part of the reason for that is Sean Johnson. And part of the reason for that is, well, he got injured and didn't have a chance to sort of show it too much. So he had an interview when he was sort of recovering from injury about 4 months ago saying he's really keen next year to showcase his kicking game a bit more. Now, players in interviews you can't exactly trust as to, oh, yeah, definitely this is what's going to happen. But for him to be keen to take on a little bit more responsibility, especially if he is with Tamara Martin, who isn't the greatest kicker of the ball, um, there could be a decent upgrade there for him, even if it's only like 100 meters. That's plus 3 points. You add some 3 or 4 points of goals on top of what he already had because he had a couple of goals, and you take out that injury, and all of a sudden you're looking at kind of 6, 7, 8 points of value. And then if he has some good attacking games, Warriors do a little bit better than expected. All of a sudden you've got a really nice cash cow going. But
Mm.
yeah, that's the pros. Cons are, well, injury history. And another big one is that it could be Tana Boyd instead, and he would soak up a lot of kick meters like Sean Johnson did last year, and maybe it wouldn't turn out the way that it would with Tamara Martin. So I've currently got Martin there at the moment, but in all honesty, we don't really know which one's going to sit there to start the year yet.
Yeah, definitely. And Tamati, he played pretty well, to be fair, in terms of being able to put on tries and try assists. There were games there he'd score one and set up three or four, and it was pretty wild at that. And they had some good wins in there. So you'd imagine he gets first crack. And with Metcalf on him wanting to kick more, he always came through as a seven. So that's something to think of as well. All the way through the juniors and everything. He's just in the NRL is just taken an opportunity when he can grab it. Whereas if you look at his New South Wales Cup stats, he just absolutely dominates, attacking wise, and always came through as a seven. So keep that in mind with Luke. And then Tomato, mate, with that 43 average, if it lines up like this, is there any sign of him improving on that, getting closer to a 50, or are we going to see probably two halves that split the role and are probably closer to the 40 each?
I think it's going to be a little bit too much split for Tamara Martin to be a really good option. I got it really excited at first when I looked at him, but when I dove into that 51 average when he was halfback without SJ, a little bit of it was inflated because there was one game with Chance at 5'8" where he kicked like 600 meters because Chance doesn't kick.
Mhm.
And there was like 1.8 try assists a game. That's not sustainable. 8 game sample. It'll come down a bit from there. So I split the difference a bit, put him in high 40s. So yeah, I think it's just short of being really an option.
Yeah, and if it was to be true and Metcalf took a little bit of the kicking in his second year at the club, then yeah, probably is closer to that 43 or so with a drop in some of those try assist games because they were wild. But yeah, I wouldn't call it luck per se, but he had back to just games in a row where he would get that three try assists or so. And I was looking at Heinz's stats the other day, and he went, I think that 4 games in a row, he averaged over 80. He went back to back to back to back two try assist games, and he just didn't have that the rest of the year. So
Wow.
if Nico can't do it, regularly enough, and it's hard for those guys to do it, then sort of three a game for a stretch sounds pretty ridiculous. So yeah, an interesting one to follow is that halves conundrum at the Warriors, and obviously the middle forwards is going to be a big thing as well, mate. With Tohu, unfortunately for us viewers that enjoy him retiring, and we do see James Fisher Harris coming over replacing Adam Fanua Blake, which is a tremendous replacement. That's for sure. It's not often you lose one of the best forwards in the game and probably get the best forward in the game. So congrats to the Wars on that one. I think he's going to bring a lot. And fantasy wise, made a 44.9 average at a team where they really like to split their big boys in him and Leota for sort of that 45 to 50 minutes. Sometimes it could be lower near that 40 mark, especially when you got a guy like Isaiah Yo that hits an 80 minutes in that 13. And the Warriors don't have that guy in at 13. So there has to be minutes somewhere for a couple of these guys. And we do know that Barnett takes big minutes. Is Fisher Harris going to take those big minutes in your mind?
I think there's a solid chance he does. I couldn't push him up too high when I was pushing this pack around, but that's mainly because Jackson Ford, if he's on the bench, will play middle and would probably, with his motor, play decent minutes. That's the only thing stopping Fisher Harris playing 60, 65 minutes, to be honest. I see that as probably his floor. PPM maybe a little high. He was higher than that last year, but previously he's been sort of around the point 0.9 mark, so split that. The thing is, I also noted when I was going through his Penrith games last year, almost without fail, when they had a tight game, like against the Storm or against the Roosters or something like that, and it went down to the wire, Fisher Harris would regularly be playing 65 and 70 in those games before just going back to 45 next week. He's a leader that stays on the park and lets them win. And I think this is the minimum that he goes. Like, if you're getting low 50s from him at worst, he could potentially be a 60 minute guy on a 55 average.
Mm. Yeah, and even if it was to be, yeah, it did round out to a 55 to 60 minutes. And, some games it might be higher, like you said, and then other games that they might give him that rest and play the 45 or so, which we did see with Adam Fanua Blake. There were games there where he'd sort of play the 49 minutes at times. And then if they had injuries, and, if Tohu wasn't there, if injuries came up, he would increase his minute load a lot. So, that could be interesting with Fish at this team in the Wars. They're going to be in a fair few close games, aren't they? Within that sort of 12 points, which is, yeah, that range where you'd expect their leaders to stick on. And yeah, at a 44.9, if you do scroll on footy statistics and go through sort of 50 plus minute games, it's pretty damning, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks really solid. There are a few good mid options this year that are sort of around that price bracket with potential to be in the 50s. And Fish is one of them. If you go him, I can't see any reason to talk you out of it.
And if you were to only go the one warrior player, that means in round five, you've just got the one guy out. And I don't think we're going to be short of mids. And that's probably the
Mm,
big issue as well, is that if you would be buying him to load up with, a Payne Haas, Endor, Isaiah Yeo, Terrell May, there's a lot of money up there. And if you'd like to spread your cash a little bit more across your team, or if we do happen to miss out on a few cheapies, it could be a little bit of a problem. But if all things shake out adequately, then I do believe that Fisher Harris is probably a guy that you could hold longer term, given the age
mm.
has just turned 29, I believe. He had a birthday a week ago or something like that. So he's got, at least a couple of years, you'd say, of hitting really good minutes, and then he'll probably peter out it from, 31, 32 onwards. You'd say with the amount that he's obviously put his body through. He's a hard nosed fellow, that's for sure. And then just looking at the pack, mate, when you've got the edges, you've got Niukore at 60, you've got Capewell at 80. That there shows that there's at least one guy that's going to have, there's some minutes to go around from one of them. And it could even potentially be two, mate, couldn't it? You could have 60-60 and spread a bit of, spread some minutes, whether it's forward splitting to sides, or they've got a couple of guys that can play that middle role of 13, like the Walkers, Clarks, these types of guys. Niokore seems to be injured a lot. So if they were to lose a guy or two as well, you could see it very easily that those big dudes in Barnett could easily go to a 70 or an 80-minute game, and Fish could go up as well. Um, it's just not as stacked in those type of longer minute big boys, I suppose, which is can lend it to be a good decision for sure to buy one of those two players.
Yeah, I agree. I think this right now, right here, with these players that they have, is pretty much the only situation where they're using a decently sized minutes bench, because some teams use their bench a lot, some teams don't. Warriors, when I was going through some of their minutes, seem to have a really, really low minute split. As you said, Barnett would play 60, 65, 70 on the regular. Adam Fanil Blake could play 55, 60, 65 on the regular. Tohu would bust himself and play big minutes. There was just all the time, there was like 20, 25, 15 minutes from the bench. If one of them goes down, it's just better and better for those guys like Fisher Harris.
Mm. Yes, I suppose it could be a cool one to start with, or obviously to monitor, but just know that he's got nice stats when he does play big minutes. But we don't know at this point how coach is going to use him, do we? We know how he's going to use, Barnett, you'd imagine, after seeing last year and how good he played. But Clark coming over and Fisher Harris coming over are the two newbies, and yeah, we just aren't sure. Nick already didn't play a lot last year. Kind of, you know, if he's now had some time to recover his injuries that he had last year, does he get back into big minutes? There's a few question marks with this pack. Obviously, Jackson Ford, who started the year at Edge as well and has been moved back to the bench. Plenty there to think about. And Aaron Clark, mate, the next guy on the list, I think we've got him and Dylan Walker to speak about. You haven't got any lovely color on either of those two. Talk to me about that situation at 13.
So Dylan Walker is an interchange specialist. He loves to run it up through the middle with and provide a real big impact off the bench. When he actually starts, he really measures himself and goes back a bit. I think his lock PPM was only about zero point 0.7 or so, which is quite low for middle forward. Interchange, it was up like zero
Nice.
point 0.9 or something. So
And
I
no
think
point
he
6
needs
though.
a really big minutes in order to do that. So I think he averaged about 45 or 47 for 68 minutes at
Okay.
lock last year. And when he's already priced in the low to mid 40s, don't think he's going to be heaps of value unless he plays 80 all the time. Aaron Clark
Okay.
would probably be better if he was to swap with Dylan Walker's and start in the 13 and get 50, 55 minutes because we've seen what he can do PPM wise at the Titans, and it's a little bit better than Dylan Walker.
Yeah, well, that 45 and 69 you've got is a
Yeah,
0.65 compared to that point 0.9 is pretty crazy. And then Aaron Clark, yeah, that's the thing. It's just who gets the role, hey? And do you expect if Aaron Clark was to win the role, would it be just trade minutes and be like a 50 and 35 or something like that?
I think so. I think if Dylan Walker starts, he'll be likely to do more minutes than Aaron Clark would if Aaron Clark were to start, but I don't think it'd be heaps different. Like if Aaron Clark starts, I could see him getting 50 minutes or even 45 minutes a lot easier than I could see Dylan Walker getting 45, 50 minutes at the 13 role.
Mm. Yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, Walker would, I said 45 is pretty wild. He's priced at 42.5, and if he added 15 minutes, he'd have 2.5 points of value. That's pretty wild by adding 15 minutes. But that makes sense. Yeah, you know that you have to measure yourself, don't you? And some people have to do that. Probably makes sense with the smaller guys that you would have to do that if you know you have to play big minutes. Whereas the big guys that probably can handle themselves a little bit better if they've got a nice motor on them. My mate Dimitri Valmaga, there, he is signed up until 2028, which is pretty crazy. It's an exciting young forward coming through. He did have 2 games last year and looked pretty damaging. With Tohu Harris going, I think he does make that 17 like you've got there. And is he one of those guys that we probably have to wait and see if an injury or two comes and he can get some more minutes because you've got a fair bit of experience around him, don't you? And at the moment, it probably
Mm.
does look like that 20-minute role building up into the season.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. I think he is one that's going to build, and we're going to have to watch that build because he could sneak up on us and play 20, 20, 20, and then by round 6 or 7, he's like 25, 30. And then if you're not really watching, all of a sudden he could be like 350, 400K.
Mm.
So I don't think he's probably going to play that much at the start of the season, but is going to become a really good player. Sort of a Blake Moses situation, been waiting on him to step into bigger and bigger minutes. I think Vaimaga, who's changed his name in the offseason, a bit like Marshu did,
Mm.
from Sifakula to Vaimaga. So if you don't recognize the name, that's where that's from.
Yeah, he's taking his mum's name, which is cool. But I suppose the only thing to look at with him is that middle rotation, right? So if you've got Fish and Barnett, there's 45 minutes from your spreadsheet there that needs to be taken up in the middle, which probably just isn't enough, is it? If it was Barnett to be like in the 13 role and they needed sort of straight up, go forward front rowers, then there's probably a bit more space. But if those two line up at 8 and 10, it's probably a little bit tough, isn't it?
Yeah. As I was mentioning before with Fisher Harris and this bench, I think if they have one guy out of this, there's a bunch more relevance. Like uh, Vaymalga and Fisher Harris probably add another 5, 10 minutes, and you see some real interest pop up. But yeah, at this stage, it balances out all right for now.
Mm. And the big interesting thing, obviously, with Harris retiring, and Clark's probably come over here and looking to get a few more minutes under his belt, which he hasn't got for the most part, apart from injuries in that Titan side. And it just looks like he'll probably slip into that same role, doesn't he? Even with Tohu there, not there anymore, which is something interesting to look at as well. Like he's going to be wanting more minutes, and just where does it come from? That's the big tough one.
Yeah. The ideal situation would be he plays 30 for a month, drops 150K, and then he starts, and then we get 300K.
Yeah, yeah, good chance of that for sure. And mate, moving to a couple of guys on the watch list, you got Tuapiki there. If C&K was to go down or get moved to center, you've got there a 35.8. He's priced at, and he's another year older. Be pretty interesting for sure if anything came up there.
Yeah, I think so. He had injury affected average, so if he's priced at where he averaged, he'll have a bit of value just on that. He had some really good attack, and I think he runs a lot of meters, so his base is quite good for a fullback as well. He's a little bit like C&K. He runs a lot of meters, but he makes a little bit does a little bit more. Maybe not as much workhorse because he's a little bit smaller, I think, but yeah, he's still going to be pretty good if he does get that fullback role.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of Keeney about him. Just
Yeah.
hasn't hit those heights, I suppose, as yet, which took Kenny a bit as well. And then Tanner Boyd, mate, when he did sign with the Waz, a lot of people came out and said, "Oh, he's first picked in my team." It seems like that has subsided a little bit, that sort of hype. But if he was to get that starting seven, is he someone that you'd look at?
He's definitely someone I'd consider. He's been historically a mid to high 40s guy in 2023, dropped a bit last year. Think there was a little bit of injury there too. I don't know exactly where he'll fall, but it's got to be at least 5 points, if not closer to that 10. Just with that huge kick meter spread that is available if Metcalf is there and he steps into SJ's role.
Definitely. And mate, with the Waz, I think we'll be leaving that there. They have a fairly solid first four games. So if you're worried about that, it's Canberra, Manly, Roosters, and Tigers, which should be fine before the bye into Melbourne and Brisbane. Following that, but guys, I haven't mentioned in a while. But if you're still watching this and you haven't subscribed, get around it. Put that notification bell on as well. Haven't asked for a little subscription in probably 6 months, 6 months to 9 months. So thanks for that. And that'll leave us with the Waz. And up next, we will have the.
Penrith Panthers.
Yeah, there it is. So that'll be a fun one. That's for sure. And I don't know, maybe, hopefully, we have a little bit more information on iPad pretty soon. But he's fighting for that edge spot, eh?
Mm.